Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be covering the graphic settings and Nvidia filter settings for Warzone, as I've made changes to mine and I've seen several other content creators post their own related content to those filters. So I thought I'd incorporate them all into one video so it could be your one-stop shop. Obviously, this is more geared towards the PC player, but there will be a few console tips thrown in there as well. If you enjoyed the video, learned something new, please do me a favor, hit the like button. If you're brand new, want to find your way back, double check, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Let's go ahead and get into it. With the recent release of the Nvidia GeForce RTX 30 series cards, Gigabyte decided to sponsor this video, hook me up by sending me a 3080 card to kind of test out for myself and kind of talk over a few different points with you guys and give you a better idea of what these cards are capable of. One of the biggest ones here is the Nvidia Reflex Low Latency. There's actually 3 different settings for this. You can do it disabled, which isn't really going to help you a bunch. You're going to go ahead and put it to enabled. This is going to help the overall system latency, especially for those items that are GPU dependent. If you go ahead and swap it over to the enabled plus boost, which is what I'm going to recommend for Warzone since it's primarily CPU bound, this one helps specifically with CPU bound items. So it's going to help reduce that overall latency, which is going to help the overall feel of the game as well. One other part that helps with this card is the max covered cooling. And there's 3 different things going on. One is they have these stacked fans, which is going to help from the airflow to be split by the triangular fan edge and guide smoothly through the 3D stripe curve on the fan surface. They also have a wind claw design, which reinforces and channels the airflow to completely cover the heatsink, which will keep those temperatures a little bit lower. They also use alternate spinning, which can reduce the turbulence of the adjacent fans, increase air pressure, and lead to better heat dissipation. And if you're looking to get one for yourself, check out the link in the description to purchase the new Gigabyte GeForce RTX 30 card. Thank you to Gigabyte for sponsoring this video. So as we go through this system, what we're going to see is the full screen display mode. That's generally where you're going to get a little bit better frames. Some people will put it in windowed. It's really depending on what you're going to do. Some streamers do that so they can tab out and it doesn't like crash their game or whatever. Again, it comes down to preference. Your monitor is really going to be specific to whatever you have. I have a 1440p monitor that runs at 144 frames. My GPU is a 3080 card. We also have the refresh rate set to 144 for the monitor. And then I have my render resolution set to 100. I know there's all kinds of weird stuff that people do where they raise it or they'll lower it and then they'll mess with DLSS. I don't mess with none of that. I just keep it simple. I have everything running through the default resolution that it's supposed to have, and that's what I pretty much run it at. Aspect ratio automatic, sync frames disabled. We want desync disabled. You can do a custom frame rate. If you just want the maximum frames as possible, you could just leave that as custom and then put everything pretty much kind of maxed out for those scenarios. NVIDIA highlights, you can disable that. Like we've already talked about the NVIDIA boost, we want that on. Display gamma, I keep that as a default. Streaming quality, normal. Texture resolution, normal. This one is probably one of the biggest hits to your frames. I noticed that even if I did this on high, I lost about 20 frames. I mean, the game looks good, but at normal, I don't really notice a significant difference in terms of actual quality of the game, especially at 1440p. If you are at 1080p, this might be something that you can do because your system can handle it. Keeping in mind that I know a 3080 card is a very powerful card and that is not in everyone's PC. So you kind of got to mix and match what works best for you. The texture filter, I put it normal. Particle quality, low. Enabled. Tessellation, disabled. I mean, I could put that up and it probably wouldn't do nothing, but I don't really notice a difference in either one. I've really never noticed when it comes to those settings. So it's kind of one of those things I don't really mess with anymore. On-demand textures, I do have that enabled and that'll allow for things to load in. Map resolution, I have that as normal. I could go higher. You can see that that one impacts frames generally as well. I don't really notice a huge difference and I don't need my shadows to be that crystal clear, so I don't really care that much. The cache spot shadows and the cache sun shadows, I have those disabled. Particle lighting, I have that on ultra. Just because from what I've seen, that can actually help improve frames. But like I said, you got to go and kind of figure out some of these for yourself if you feel like, you know what, maybe I'm adjust this one. Generally with this one, I have not noticed a difference in actual frames, so not really huge difference. DirectX ray tracing. You generally only put this on when you're playing like the campaign. You want that immersion, that visceral feel of the game. With Warzone, I just want to make sure I can see the guy I'm shooting and that the game looks relatively clear so that when I upload content, it looks good for the viewer. If I wanted to do my settings a little bit different where I was getting max frames, obviously I would adjust some of these settings so I can get even more frames. Even though my monitor is capped at 144, I'd have to upgrade my monitor before I was trying to stretch for those ones. Filmic strength 0. One thing I will touch on now that it has been fixed is DLSS. Nvidia DLSS, depending on what setting will make sense for your individual resolution. Obviously, there's not a lot of people playing at 8K or 4K, but those of you who are out there, you might want to experiment with this to see if you're going to get more frames. They did have an issue where there was misaligned sights where the bullets weren't actually going where the optic was, but Raven has already released an update saying that this has already been fixed. So depending on your setup, it might be worth giving a try. Anti-aliasing, I have that on just because I like my game to look clean. I know a lot of people chase frames, they turn that off. Completely up to you. Depth of field, world, motion blur, all these are disabled. Film grain, I only put that one to 1 because there was kind of like a thing going around where it would help, but I don't notice the difference. So 0 or 0.1, whatever, 0.01, it's all the same. Dynamic resolution, I don't mess with any of that because I'm already getting a reasonable amount of frames. A lot of time when you use DLSS or dynamic resolution, sometimes what will happen is there can be blurry spots when the game is transitioning between different resolutions. So a lot of times just to keep it whatever it is, if it looks good, I don't need it changing different resolutions dynamically while I'm playing. Not really a fan of the feature, even though, like I said, DLSS works really good in Cold War. Because you can't see people if you have it on or off. That's just kind of how the game was designed, I guess. And then we got another one here, which we're going to actually look at this specific one in game. So these are the default, regular, what the game looks like without you changing anything other than the regular graphical changes that you're accustomed to changing, right? What we'll do is now look at the HUD, for example. So when we go in here, we can see our HUD. What I'm going to do is show you this part. A lot of times people don't realize how big you can adjust this particular out of bounds. So if we go ahead and do this one, and let's say we max it out, do the horizontal HUD and do that max, and then this one we do it max. What's going to happen is when we go over here, you can see how close the map is to the corner, as well as my field upgrade, my nade, my gun, ammo, all that type of stuff. So there's two schools of thought on this. One is you keep the center of your screen clear. So, if you need to shoot somebody, it's not blocked by anything or whatever. So that's one. So you want that as close to the edge as possible. The other is to actually make it the opposite. So now when we go over here, so now when I do this, I normally rock this at like 10, 12, somewhere around there. Let's just say 10, 12, and we'll go there. And then what happens is, it's fine right there, whatever, apply settings. So now what happens is it's not touching necessarily the corners. This is more specific to like TV players. If you're on a TV, that'll definitely notice a difference, because the other school of thought is if I'm looking at the center of my screen, if I need to check the mini map, instead of necessarily having to turn my head or whatever, I could just look and my eyes don't have to go as far. So the distance between them is still my peripheral. I can kind of see the center of the screen. I can see how much ammo I have at a glance. I can see my plates, all that. Not that you can't, but that little bit of difference is enough where you're kind of like seeing stuff. And it's like, okay, I have to look there, there, there. And then it's a little bit closer to the center of the screen. Not so much that it's literally on your crosshairs, because it's not. We've seen that it moved just a little bit from the corner. And that's kind of how that works. So that's, again, a preference. If you go to these other settings, a lot of these do come down to preference. If you are on console, one of the things that a lot of times people will try to do is they're going to mess with the color type. And then they can enable this, and they can actually do this for both. So the game has a little different look and feel. Automatically, this is organically what you can do in the game. You can change it to the other one. This one actually looks good by default almost. This would be the one that I would run if I had no filters. That's kind of how you would go. If you go with the Tritanopia, which I think a lot of people use, it kind of has that like orangish look, pinkish to it. Blow myself up so no one's following me. So you have several different options. That is a definitely, if you don't have the access to this, this is probably the one I would rock. Just because it looks good. You could probably even do it where it just does the interface or the world only, and then it'll do the world, but then the HUD and all the player icons stay the same. If you don't want to adjust anything, you don't have the settings, whatever, this is probably the one you would rock, just so you have it, right? So now what I'll do is go ahead and swap this, and then now what we can do is go ahead and look at these filters in game. First ones I'm going to have for you are mine, and these ones are usually pretty basic. Let's go to 1. We'll add a filter so we can actually see split screen, and then what we'll do is have it there in split screen. And that's why my camera's right at the top. I'm going to go over the settings, and you can see there's not a drastic difference between the left and the right. They look very similar. It's just the one on the right has a little bit more clarity. Mine didn't go overboard. And the main reason these ones look this way is because the shadows, you'll be allowed to see people on the stairs. So when I'm here, you can see that the right is a little bit clearer. You could adjust it to make it, but look at the one on the left. These are literally side by side. Look at this hallway. This room. If I cut across, if I go outside. The one on the right, it looks like the base one. Just a little bit more light, a little bit more clarity, but not overdone. You can see that this, instead of being so dark, it's a little bit brighter on the right, but not so much that it's like way overdone, because I like mine looking about as close to the game as it is going to, right? So we have it looks like that. You can see around in the sky. The sun's glaring regardless, because the sun's like the last team that you can't, you have to worry about all the time. And this is this one. I have the settings up for you guys on screen, so you guys can take a screenshot of these ones. But let's go ahead and compare them to the next one. The next one is actually Modern Warzone, and this one has an aesthetic I'm not really a fan of, but I know people will like. If we come through over here, you can see that the color is way more saturated. You can see the distinct lines in the paint here. If I look at this, you can kind of see what's going on. It does have a little bit of darkness that I'm not really a fan of. But it also illuminates these rooms pretty good, and I don't know if that's just the color, but when we walk in, you can kind of see how that works. We'll come back over here, and we'll kind of show how this looks in here. So it still does a pretty good job of illuminating it. Looking down the hall, it looks good. It's very saturated, which I know some people are a fan of. Personally, I'm not. But again, comes down to preference. The details are a little too sharp. The sharpness might be a little high for me. But looking at this, it looks good to me too. A little bit on the edge of too much there, but it is another option. Again, screenshots there if you want to go ahead and copy those filters. Now we're going to go ahead and go to Iceman Isaacs. And Iceman Isaacs is a little bit different because with his, you got to adjust the brightness in game, or else this just doesn't look right. You can't hardly see, right? So you're going to go to the brightness in game. And then we have the brightness here at 50, but we would raise it to like 70 or something like that. And then now it has that little bit of a look to it. And then now when we look at it side by side, it makes it a little bit hard to really give a good side by side, because now the other one's going to be washed out from the color correction. But you can adjust that and make those changes where you could actually lower this a little bit. And his look pretty solid as well. I think they look almost similar to mine and to a certain extent with the change to the brightness. Let's go ahead and go outside. The main thing you want to do with these is just go in both ways, because the way the game looks outside and inside are completely different. This one, I feel like the colors are a little bit different, too much. But like I said, I'm very simple. I don't like a lot of the changes. I just like, hey, you know what? When I go into a room, I want to be able to see the rose skin right there. And I think this one does an okay job of doing that. You do have to adjust the brightness in game, which will throw things off a little bit. But overall, you got kind of the differences there. You can kind of see them in the game, literally side by side. And again, there's a screenshot of those specific options. A lot of people mentioned in the comment section, hey, won't that drop frames? Yes, it's going to drop frames. Can't you just go to the Nvidia control panel? Probably, but most people struggle to figure that stuff out. So I've just gone through, shown you the simplest way to do it with the Nvidia graphics filters, so you can kind of adjust those for yourself. That being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, learned something new. If you did, please do me a favor, hit the like button. If you're brand new, want to find your way back, double check, make sure you subscribe with notifications on. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.